Hello everyone, we are going to discuss how cognitive bias, initially used to estimate welfare, could also highlight the importance of adopting the strange framework. So I'm going to present you my study dealing with the existence of cognitive biases in canaries, which represents how individuals' emotional states can modulate their decision-making regarding ambiguous information. To improve the quality of life of animals living in captivity, we need to develop relevant and efficient measures of their welfare, assessing their emotional states. But physiological measures are sometimes quite invasive, and most behavioral measures indicate often emotional arousal, but not always the balance, positivity, or negativity of these emotions. Cognitive bias constitutes a novel measure of animal welfare that is non-invasive and indicates the balance of subjects' emotions. Studying cognitive biases rely on a quite simple paradigm. Individuals have to discriminate between two stimuli associated with two outcomes, an attractive one and an aversive one, in a go-no-go procedure. And during the test phase, an intermediate stimulus is presented to the individual and represents an ambiguous information. We assume that individuals living in the best conditions will treat ambiguous stimulus more positively than others. Their emotional state would modulate their decision-making to make them associate the intermediate stimulus preferentially to the attractive one. Cognitive biases have been studied in many species. For example, depressed people tend to interpret ambiguous natural verbal information more negatively than others. And rhesus macaques treat ambiguous visual stimuli more negatively if they just experience a stressful situation. The use of an intermediate location regarding the two locations used during the training phase has often been relied to study this phenomenon. In dogs, individuals showing separation-related behavior, which includes some kind of vocalizing and destruction when the owner is away, showed a pessimistic bias compared to others. Similarly, in sheep and in rats, going through a stressful treatment or living in an anxiogenic environment also induce a pessimistic bias. The existence of cognitive biases has also been found in bird species like hens and starlings. All these studies show the impact of the environment on affective states using locations or other visual stimuli. Besides, correlation with other measures of welfare have been found. Indeed, in European starlings, individuals who present stereotypy are more pessimistic than those who do not, and the administration of a serotonin inhibitor in sheep induce a pessimistic bias, suggesting the involvement of the brain reward circuits. In our study using domestic canaries, we use two locations associated with two outcomes, and we place the dish at an intermediate location during the test phase. We use three possible intermediate locations representing three ambiguous information. And we measure individual latency time to reach the presented dish. So for an individual, the attractive dish containing palatable food would always be presented at one side of the test cage. And the aversive dish containing aversive food would be presented at the opposite side. The aversive food is made by adding a bitter substance, and if the bird still feed on this dish, a little piece of cardboard is shaped by the experimenter to make the bird fly away. During the test phase, an empty dish is presented at 5 different possible locations, including the central ones. And we assume that an optimistic bird would associate an ambiguous location more often to the attractive one, and so would fly on the dish faster than a pessimistic bird. we interest in the effect of social context of housing, living in pair versus living alone, and we verified the influence of some individual personality traits on canaries' cognitive biases. 43 birds were tested, both in short and long daylight schedule, and we were divided in two groups. Half individuals were housed in pair, and half were housed alone in the cage. The social context of housing was then switched so that each subject could be tested both when living in pair and when living alone. If living in pair constitutes a social arrangement, paired individuals would be more optimistic than isolated ones. Besides, testing made choice let us measure female preferences among 4 males by measuring the time she spends close to each of them. Then half of females in pair were paired with their favorite male, while the other half was paired with the least preferred one. We studied individuals' latency time to reach the presented dish according to its location. We only analyzed data with unrewarded dishes, and Canary managed to categorize dishes according to their location, going fast on the attractive one and not going on the aversive one. Social context did not affect how birds treated the training locations, which is really good for the interpretation of our data. Paired individual treated the most ambiguous location, the central location, more positively than isolated ones. They associated the central location more often to the attractive dish than to the aversive dish. Therefore, living in pair induced an optimistic bias. And this optimistic bias occurs even in short daylight schedules, so exists despite the absence of reproductive phase. However, being housed with the favorite male or with the least preferred one didn't seem to modulate females' optimism. But for these comparisons, number of birds group might be too low to really expect a significant effect. We also calculated an attachment index measuring the time spent in an area close to the partner in a new environment minus the time spent in the same area when individual was alone. It appeared that the more a male canary was attached to its female, the more he became optimistic, or the least he became pessimistic, as presented here. In female canaries, the slope tended to be inclined in the same way, but the correlation was not significant. In addition to social context, we wonder if personality could be linked to individual optimism. We measured 6 traits of it: aggressiveness, neophobia, 2 traits of obstinacy, boldness, locomotion, and sociability. But we found no correlation between pessimism or optimism and any of these personality traits. So our study highlighted the influence of social context on canaries' emotional states, being housed in pair and making them more optimistic than being housed alone. But our data did not reveal any link with personality traits, suggesting that an individual would be more optimistic or pessimistic per se, but could become so in particular context. Therefore, our experiments suggest that social background can modulate individual behaviors and highlight the importance of adopting the strength framework. Thank you for your attention.